Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred. And today I want to share with you the portrait of my own codependent, people-pleasing, caretaking part, some of you may know, named Cassandra. And so I'm going to just kind of share her history, how she developed the layers of cultural, religious, personal burdens that she carried. And then I want to tell you about her healing story and how she healed. So just to have a specific example, as always, when I share my own inner work, the specifics of it, it's really meant to inspire you, to empower you to do the inner work and go in and ask your own parts what's true about their experience, not to be prescriptive. A lot of times people will say, oh, okay, so it was this and this and this, and then they think that that's also true in their own system. And some of it might be, but you always want to go inside your own system and ask the parts directly, and they will tell you their story. And it might take years for them to tell you their story, and that's okay. It's all very, very worth it. Okay, so I'm going to share Cassandra's story. This is a portrait of a people-pleasing part. My dear Cassandra. Okay. So Cassandra became a parentified child at about age 6. She told me that she was 6. Her mother, who was grieving her own father's death, was depressed, unavailable, and often reverted to her own young parts and needed caretaking, particularly emotionally. So Cassandra, this 6-year-old part of me, stepped up and became hyper responsible, perfectionistic, always on the lookout for what would please or displease her mother. She began to feel that this was a life or death situation, since her mother needed to be cared for so that she could in turn take care of Cassandra, or me, of little Christine, right? 6-year-old Christine. So, and this really started, I was less than 3 when 2.5, I think, when my grandfather died suddenly in a car crash. And my mother, understandably, really, really struggled with that and didn't know how to really be available to herself and the grieving, hurting parts of herself. And so therefore wasn't able to give from overflow, wasn't able to be there, particularly emotionally, right, to attune to me as a young child. And so as a kid, at that age, you just assume it's my fault, right? Something must be wrong with me. If I'm just perfect, maybe I'll get the attention and attunement I need. Maybe I won't cause any waves, I won't cause any problems. So then my caretakers will be able to take care of me. Maybe if I am hyper responsible, and don't put any burden, any extra weight, right, on my mother. I understood she could not handle that, right? So I had to become pretty hyper independent. So so when I say Cassandra, you know that this is basically a 6-year-old part of me, right? Cassandra's fawning and caretaking strategies were praised at school and church. She was given lots of affirmation for being a good girl and for abdicating her own needs for others. She was selfless, right? She was all of these qualities that are praised, particularly in education and religion, good citizenry, right? These are the things that help groups, right? If a teacher is in charge of 30 kids, or a pastor is trying to run a large church or a large group of people, you want people to be compliant. You want them to fall in line. You want them to follow the rules, to do what they're told, right? Because that makes an easier experience in the group setting. And so there's no wonder, right, that culturally those things are praised. But it's often an endorsement of abdicating our own needs, right? Hold your bladder until it's time for recess. finish your plate even when you're full. Do this monotonous homework that you absolutely would never choose of your own will to do. Just things like that. So later, when Christine met her first husband, who struggled with managing his own trauma wounds through addictions and rage, so he had kind of this cluster of parts that's often on the opposite side of codependency, which can be addicted, using parts, narcissistic type parts, and raging parts. So when this union happened, again, like I've explained in past videos, it makes sense, right? That people with a narcissistic cluster of parts and people with codependent parts come together because they both agree. This one says, you need to take care of my needs. And this one says, I need to take care of your needs. So they agree. But at that time, Cassandra, my 6-year-old part, was employed to please and caretake him. So again, she had this very valuable role to keep my system safe by doing what she did best, what she had done for many, many, many years, to fawn and abdicate her own needs. But eventually, through violent abuse, Cassandra's fear of death, if she did not please my first husband, was reinforced, right? Because when I first went in and asked Cassandra, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't please the person in front of you? She said, I'll die, right? And that was true when she was young, because if she doesn't caretake her caretakers and then they can't take care of her, she dies, right, as a kid. But then it was reinforced with an abusive partner, because he would threaten death if I ever did anything that was displeasing to him. So she was like, yeah, I'm going to die if I don't fawn, if I don't do exactly what the person in front of me wants me to do. But then when my husband died by suicide, Cassandra had this new layer of fear that it was her fault, that she hadn't pleased him enough. And so the consequence of not pleasing was not only my own death, but the other person's death. Because about a year before my first husband died by suicide, I've talked about this, and maybe I'll talk about it in the next slide, but I had been doing a lot of inner healing work, and my dear Sebastian, who does hold self-agency and cares about my needs, was able to come out of exile a little bit and advocate for some of my needs, and eventually gave me the clarity that I needed to leave this abusive environment. But then so I did leave, which was very displeasing. And the consequence, the result was that my first husband died by suicide. So in Cassandra's mind, it was her fault. She didn't stand her ground, because if it were up to her, we would stay forever and abdicate our needs, right? And since that didn't happen, she took on a lot of the responsibility of my first husband's death. The other parts did as well. But so her burdens, you can see that while Cassandra was developed at age 6 and then reinforced through my life, through all of these other, legacy burdens, cultural burdens, religious burdens, reinforced, but then getting into this dynamic of agreeing with the taking partner. Yes, I need to give to you at my own expense. And then the threat of violence and death if I didn't please my first husband really reinforced her fears. And then once she was compromised, in a sense, she didn't fawn. Now he dies. So, I mean, just layer upon layer upon layer of this, her burdens. Okay, so what did it look like to heal Cassandra? So initially, Cassandra let me know that 80% of her burden was a legacy burden, and 20% was from personal experience. So Cassandra and I first did a legacy unburdening in which we invited ancestors from both my mother's and my father's sides to pass up their burdens of caretaking. And we threw them into a volcano. They were like these heavy rocks that they passed up, and we carried up this mountain and threw them into the lava. This took one session to do this beautiful legacy unburdening. But the 20% of her burden that was left of personal complex trauma, all these different layers through life, took 1.5 years to unburden. So I want to clarify some of the things here. I was starting to get to know Cassandra and just, asking her what she was afraid would happen. Like I said, she said, if she didn't fall on, she said I would die. And, I got this idea from, different literature about legacy burdens, but I asked her, what percentage of this burden is not yours? Because I did know that obviously there's this whole cultural and religious burden that's passed down to me, a witnessing of both my mother and my father, people pleasing really, and the caretaking aspect of what was expected of women, particularly in religious culture. And so I asked her, what percentage is not yours? And she said 80%. So then we did this beautiful unburdening. It was, it feels like it was yesterday. I can still feel it in my system. Amazing. And such release from that. And so I thought, oh, it's pretty much done. But what I didn't understand was that the 20% that was personal was like, it was like compact, right? It was like packed in so many experiences. So when I talked about that witnessing stage in the last video, I asked Cassandra, show me what you need me to get, right? And she would show me all of these moments where I said yes, but my truth was no. If she wanted me to really get how I had to say yes or else, like what would have happened to me. And so I remember I went to one of the first ones she showed me, and I said, what if we practiced saying no and just seeing what happens? But now I'm with you, right? I can protect you. I can advocate for you. Sometimes I would just pluck the person in front of her and put them in another country or something, like I can help you here, but let's just practice what it feels like to say no. And so it was 1.5 years of going back to probably thousands of moments when she had said yes, when her truth was no. And it was this really valuable practice. And I bet I talk about this actually in the next bullet point. So let's go on. So as Cassandra began to show me all the moments when she had said yes, when her truth was no, or neglected her own needs and capacities in order to survive, the list seemed never ending. Like I said, I would say, is there anything else you want to show me? And she would say, yep, yep, yep. And again, it's not that I'm meeting with her all day, every day for 1.5 years. I want to clarify that. It was more like whenever she would come up and I would feel her burdened, right? Like, oh, I have to say yes or I'm going to die, right? I would get curious with her and I'd say, hey, do you want to go in? Can I help you with something else? And there was always something else. She just had so many experiences where there was a really valid threat if she were to say no. So Cassandra needed me to go back to every single one of these moments from age 3 to 36 to witness and reparent or redo them. And myself agreed to take all the time that we needed. So we, Cassandra and I, the self that's not a part, spent about 1.5 years in this stage, working deeply about once per week, right? So it wasn't every day. It was whenever I would feel that she was really burdened. And again, Cassandra really wanted me to go back to all of these moments and really get them and help her redo them. Some parts don't. They're like, I just want you to get the the general gist of it, the pattern of it, and now we're good. You know, so again, just because this was my experience doesn't mean it'll be yours, but also be prepared that with complex trauma, you may need to do a lot of witnessing, and it's very worth it. So I would go back with Cassandra to each moment and practice saying no, seeing the backlash of the other person, protecting her from it, advocating for her, comforting her, helping her escape, helping her stand up for herself, all of those things. So we were redoing each and every one of these moments so that it had a different ending than originally it had. So with each practice, Cassandra got stronger and stronger, naturally able to understand her worth at the core of it, and understand what was her responsibility and what was not, right? My responsibility is to take care of myself and my own needs, and release you to take care of your own needs. And she was better able to set boundaries more easily, until she was able to start practicing in the present in my current life, right? So this was actually a really valuable way to practice in the past. Again, like building a muscle that she just did not have at all, to then come into the present. And again, I now currently have a very safe environment, a safe partner. So Cassandra doesn't have to fawn for safety anymore. So then we can start practicing that, right? And what's fascinating is with my current partnership and in my current environment and life, I'm not going to have the external threat of death, of punishment and shame, but I still have to work with the parts inside of me because the backlash is inside. If my self-agency part, Sebastian, is allowed to go to the front and advocate for my needs, there are big inner critics that will come and shame and say, no, you're being selfish, right? So I've had to work with a whole cluster of parts, inner critics around that, because the backlash is not external. I'm in a safe environment. The backlash is internal. So I have to really meet the needs of those parts. Okay, so Cassandra and I currently have a very close, affectionate relationship. And I am grateful for how she protected me in the past, very grateful. She was heroically healed from both, she has heroically healed from both cultural and legacy burdens and personal burdens. And evidence of this is in the ease with which I can now say no without shame when yes is out of alignment with my own needs and capacities. So that's the real life result of that. Okay, there's a final bullet point here. An additional piece to this puzzle has been the unexiling of my part who holds healthy anger and self-agency, the resurrection of Sebastian. And I do have a video, if you ever want to go check back in my self-therapy series. There's a whole, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 videos, specifically what it looked like really in the moment of me going in and healing some of these parts. And there's one, I believe, on that has Cassandra and Sebastian in it. So you can listen to that. I think the one that is about my suicidal part also has Cassandra and Sebastian in it. So as I got to know my different parts, I saw very clearly in the inner world how it's a system, how they're all related. They all relate to each other. Some suppress others or shame others or keep others out, fight with each other. Others are allies, right? And it's really fascinating. So they're all very connected and related. And now they not only have respect for each other, understand Cassandra and Sebastian. So Cassandra holds this healthy level of desire to have kindness and consideration toward other people, which is a great value. right? And Sebastian holds the value of having consideration and kindness toward me. And Cassandra wants to consider other people's needs, and Sebastian wants to consider my needs. And so together they create a beautiful balance, and the self in the center considers them both. I was saying recently that because Sebastian was so exiled for so long, normally what it looks like now is if I feel a bodily no, and I know what that feels like. I know when Sebastian comes up, when someone asks me for a favor for something and it's like a no, there's an aversion, right? And I really listen to that now, because if Sebastian's coming up, he's alerting me to something, right? And then Cassandra, and he might be kind of like wanting to lash out at the other person and say, you idiot, you terrible person, how dare you ask me for that, right? But Cassandra will come in and temper him and say, okay, yes, well, we can say no, but let's say it in a kind way, right? Let's get curious about, what are the unmet needs that the no, or why the no is there, and can we consider what the needs of the other person are? If they're willing, we can creatively come to a solution that meets all of those needs. So they are collaborating on the inside, and then the self speaks for them on the outside to be able to collaborate with another person's system, right? So there's collaboration and harmony on the inside, and then collaboration and harmony on the outside. So I hope that makes sense and was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below.